Please use the pop-up every session. Show him pop-up. Right. We've got GradConnection, long-time supporters of the AAGE. Years and years they've sponsored us. Years and years they've been doing workshops. Today's workshop is Back to the Future. Just go with it. We're going to live to them now in their special studio. And we're crossing to, looks like James. So over to James at GradConnection. Away you go.
Thanks, Ben. Welcome. Let's go back in time. 35 years ago this week, the Mutijulu Aboriginal community were given the freehold title to what we have come to know as Ayers Rock and the Uluru National Park. The GradConnection team acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, work and live today, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of the Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections in the lands and waters to this place we now know as Australia. We acknowledge too that we're broadcasting from the lands of the Gadigal and Wongal people, the custodians of the place we now know as Balmain. We're coming to you from Sydney Community College, circa 1985. Unfortunately, the SEEK office is closed at the moment, so whilst remaining socially distant, we've done the best with the environment that we can. This week is the same week that in 1985, Marty and Doc, our movie heroes from Back to the Future, first travelled in time. I'm hoping that at least a handful of you remember the film first time around like I do. Before I hand over to some familiar faces, Alex, Dom and Rogan, your client services team, I'll set the scene and reflect on where we've come from. By going back even further, at the turn of the last century in 1901, when our population was just 3.7 million, the university population of Australia was about 2,000. By 1939, it had grown to 14,000. At the end of World War II, when governments around the world began to rebuild economies with public funding of education, it exploded even further. And by 1948, the population was 32,000 students. By 1975, we were up to 148,000 at then just 19 universities. Numbers continued to grow, and in 1985, the scene for Back to the Future, there were some 350,000 people in higher education. Leap forward again in time to today, and 2020, alongside more than 1 million domestic students, Australia has the highest ratio of international students per head of population in the world, some 300,000 at university and 500,000 more attending other institutions. Whether it was the bat's fault or not, 2020 put the world on pause. For a moment, back in March, nobody was sure what was happening. It was when I started with the business, crazy times. Would anybody be looking for grads to start at all in 2021? Turns out we're a resilient community. Code word for this session, attraction. And today we'll share a little bit about what people are thinking, what actually happened, and what we think is likely to happen, and how we're preparing for it for 2021. Then we'll fast forward to 2055. Are you still with me? 35 years time, and look at how the world might be recruiting talent then. Alex, over to you.
Thanks, James. And very exciting to be looking into the future. And I really wish that I was seeing all of your wonderful faces today, but we will make the best with the situation that we have. So as is tradition, GradConnection is going to be running a short quiz. We pulse checked our students this year, actually in the last month or so, to see how they're feeling, how they've reacted to all of this COVID business, and to see if all of that has changed their outlook. Feel free to pop the answers that you think are in to all of the questions in the chat box, or just have a think about them wherever you're sitting today. So question number one, we asked students whether they wanted to work in an office. Do you think it's yes, they don't mind, or is it no? So interestingly, and we might not all think this, but 55% of them indicated to us that they do really want to work in an office, with 22% saying no, that they really don't want to work in an office at all. A little bit around this as well. So we have actually asked them a question around whether they would be happy to work remotely if they needed to. And 55% of them actually did tell us that they would happily do that if there was the requirement to. And only 19% were really not keen on working remotely at all at any point. We also did a little bit of, we asked questions around how many days they want to be in the office, and I'm happy to share that at a later time through the session. So the next question, and this is alongside of your keep warm strategies, which I'm sure is all top of mind at the moment. So what do you think that they would like to have as their communication preferences from future employers in the next couple of months before they start? It could be virtual events, could be emails, physical events, social media, or connecting with buddies or mentors. So the answer, according to our students, is email and physical events. Now, that could be a bit of a surprise given the scenario that we're in at the moment. And actually, I think it's reflective of the students really wanting to get back to normal socialising and workplace environments. That may not be possible for a lot of people like us. We're not in the office at the moment. So interestingly, numbers 3 and 4 were virtual events, and then number 4 was connecting with a buddy within your organisation. Sorry, connecting with a mentor within your organisation. So something to think about when you're doing your keep warm strategies. And renege rates. So this is something that really comes up quite a lot, and that there has been a lot of questions asked of our team, certainly, as to what's being seen within the grad recruitment industry. So do you think that students will keep applying for a role once they've already accepted an offer? Now, we asked this question last year as well, but this year, probably no big surprise to you that quite a lot of them are intending to keep applying regardless. Dom's going to talk a little bit further, a little bit later in our presentation about the timings and when student searches are happening. But interesting to see that actually they will keep applying. So that keep warm strategy is really important. And then if you look at the difference between 2020 and 2019, the majority in 2020 that said that they would keep applying, the reason was to keep their options open. Whereas in 2019, there was a larger proportion who were trying to keep applying to secure a higher salary. So interesting to see that shift as a result of what's happened this year, and that job security piece being something that is quite important to students. So on the screen at the moment might be some familiar icons. These are the 20 top social media platforms in the world. I'm interested to see what all of you think might be the top social media platform used by students. This is not necessarily used to find a job. This is just what they use in their everyday life. We thought that was an important question to ask. So some of you may have been surprised last year when we found that Facebook was at the top of the list. This year it has changed around. So this year Instagram is at the top of the list, also closely followed by Facebook. And then we've got down the list again, LinkedIn and Snapchat. Interestingly, some of the new platforms like TikTok and actually Twitter as well have been really low down the list this year. So I think a few people have been asking whether they should be, getting TikTok up and running for their businesses, and it's perhaps not the best place to spend your money at this point in time. So the last question before I pass over to my lovely colleague Dom is around what sort of content is the most engaging that students find online. So we are also asked this question last year, and you can see on screen things like images, stories, testimonials, live streams, blogs and videos. So what do you think is going to be the most engaging according to students? So the most engaging really is videos, also then followed by written content. This is sort of similar to last year, with videos coming out a little bit higher along the list than it did last year. This should give you a really good roadmap as to how to create your attraction content and how to really make the best of your online presence when you're going to market for next year. And this is the perfect time to start planning that, given that we'll probably be online and virtual for the next foreseeable future and likely into peak season. It's a really good way to plan out the sort of content that you'll need for next year. So we did ask a few additional questions around student motivations, their preferred number of days in the office, as I mentioned, but in the interest of time, I won't go through them right now, but do feel free to reach out later. I'm now going to pass over to the lovely Dom Delgado, who's on my right.
Hi, thanks, Alex. So 2020, I mean, what a year. I don't think anyone who attended the AAGE conference this time last year would have thought we'd be doing this conference virtually this year, but here we are. But all jokes aside, I know that 2020 has been really challenging for everyone, either on a personal level or professionally or both. But what we've seen, and I'm sure you'll all agree, the graduate recruitment industry is extremely resilient and has demonstrated its ability to adapt and make changes to recruitment processes really quickly and efficiently. So moving on to the next slide. So what have we seen this year with employers? So at the start of the pandemic, we moved pretty quickly to see how students were feeling, but also to find out what employers were intending to do with their current graduate programs. Some of the findings from our first employer survey in May showed that at the start of the pandemic, when things were looking pretty bad in the Australian market, graduate recruitment was still looking pretty positive. 88% of employers surveyed said they were still going to go ahead with their grad programs, and less than 3% cancelled. And this was mainly in the aviation industry, which isn't really that surprising. Sorry, if you go back. Yeah. So fast forward to September, and 76% of employers went to market. And while more employers had reduced their numbers than previously, it wasn't all doom and gloom. And I think that many industries will bounce back over the next couple of years. So pivot. I don't think anyone had really heard of this term pre-COVID. I know I hadn't really, but now pivot seems to be the new buzzword. It's basically the new unprecedented times, which is also something that's been used a lot this year. But basically what a pivot is that it refers to a business change that's really significant. The change or pivot is intended to help the business recover from a tough period. And I think that grad recruiters have pivoted really well this year and super quickly. The height of the pandemic was when the majority of applications for grad programs were just about to close. And moving to virtual interviews and assessments was the only thing that we could physically do and that we were allowed to do. So the existing model of face-to-face interviews and assessments was completely turned on its head. But I think what this has done is shown us that we can actually challenge the status quo. Things like assessing grads virtually can actually be done effectively, and it can actually be cost efficient, time efficient, and scalable. And this is something that we wouldn't have even considered pre-COVID, I don't think. Actually, it's actually been really beneficial for both businesses and for future grads. Businesses can attract a more diverse pool of candidates from different geographical locations, and grads can actually have a much more personalised experience from the comfort of their own home. If I'm looking at predictions, I predict that many of these changes are here to stay, although they're going to be probably in a more blended format. So looking at campaigns for grad roles. So what have we seen on our site in terms of advertised grad roles this year? So things were really looking good at the start of the year. The number of roles advertised on the site were really similar to the same time last year. And then we hit May. May was the worst year on record, and initially we were really worried. Campaign numbers started to go up though gradually in June and July, but it still wasn't at those 2019 levels that we've previously seen. It wasn't really until September of this year when numbers started to match 2019 levels, and we all breathed a bit of a sigh of relief. And this month in particular, October, Rogan, Alex and I, we've been super busy. Actually, we don't have all the data yet. We'll have that all available at the end of the month. So if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about how we performed over October, just hit up myself or Alex or Rogan, and we can provide you with that data at a later date. Cool. So this graph here is all about graduate searches and applications on our site. So our August student survey result showed that 88% of students who completed our survey earlier this year were either worried or somewhat worried that they wouldn't secure an opportunity once they graduate. And I think this is really reflected on this graph here. As you can see, 2020 searches were much higher than they were in 2019. This year, we also noticed that site traffic was much more stable this year. Whereas there's normally a huge spikes in your traditional grad season, that's sort of February, March, April, and then July, August, this just didn't really happen this year, and it was very consistent in terms of the traffic on the site. Next slide, please, Ben. Thank you. So campaigns for internships. So the internship space has been a really interesting one this year. And I think, again, that's really reflected on the data that you can see. So due to the duration of summer internships, which are normally anything from 8 to 12 weeks long, a lot of employers were reluctant to go ahead with internships, due to either not being able to deliver it in the office full time, so they were either cancelled their programs or put them on hold. And this is really reflected in July when we saw a massive dip in the number of internships advertised on the site. Some employers pivoted, my word of the week, and created a blended model with a mixture of in-office and virtual internship. Others created a virtual internship program altogether, but the number of campaigns on the site was still pretty low in comparison to the student demand. So looking at the searches and applications on the site for internships, with more students being at home, losing part-time jobs or being stood down due to COVID, searches across all disciplines for internships have been at an all-time high this year. So from April onwards, we experienced search numbers like we've never experienced before. They actually more than doubled in July this year compared to the same time last year. Applications for 2020 were also at a similar level for 2019, but clearly the demand is higher. So what you can do in the future to really meet that demand is look at virtual internships as an option. So what's going to happen next year in terms of graduate hiring? Well, from the results collected in our employer survey in September, there's going to be some changes, but they're not as drastic or dramatic as we once thought. 42% of employers have reported that there'll be no changes to their hiring numbers, and 44% overall would be reducing numbers between 5 and 50%. So things don't look as bleak as what we once thought. Yes, in some cases, numbers are going to reduce, but I think the positives that we can take from these findings are that employers are still seeing the benefits of hiring grads, and with us pivoting to more online ways of working, demand is only going to increase over the next few years, particularly in the tech industry. We also asked students and employers what works for you in terms of being delivered virtually. From the figures that you can see here, students and employers are both in agreement that interviews, assessment centres and career fairs can be delivered virtually. The challenge is virtual internships. Students want them, but many employers just don't have the adequate solutions in place. And Rogan's going to touch on some solutions for you a little bit later on. Finally, we asked students whether they would feel confident about joining an organisation without having met anyone in person, and an astonishing 84% said that they would. We'll be surveying students early in the new year, and we'll be interested to see if the answers are similar, particularly with the restrictions easing soon in some states, but my prediction is that the findings will be pretty similar. So as I said, what we've seen this year is that technology is becoming increasingly important, and being able to work and connect with people virtually is now the new normal. So I'm going to hand over to my lovely colleague, the lovable Rogue.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all joining us. Given our theme, we thought it would be fun to take a look at what technology is out there and maybe sort of make some predictions of our own. I had a browse to see what technology was being developed with recruitment in mind and what we might be in for over the next few years. One piece of technology that caught my attention was Robot Vera. Robot Vera is an AI service which finds candidates, conducts interviews, and screens resumes. The technology offers results that are around 10 times faster than traditional human interaction and can run through 1,500 candidates in a single day. The firm only started 2 years ago, but already has several big name clients such as Pepsi, IKEA, and L'Oreal. After watching a video of Robot Vera in action, I can confidently say that there's no impending robot apocalypse, but we can sort of see where the technology is going. Even though it does need to make some progress, we can sort of see where things are heading. The overarching theme that is apparent across all industries when it's regarding AI is where there are sort of mundane tasks or anything that's repetitive, at some point AI is going to come through and replace it. What that means for jobs, and specifically for grad recruitment, is that the focus of the role will shift. More emphasis will be put on strategy and engagement rather than sort of the repetitive tasks. More time will be spent sort of building, engaging with younger talent, building a brand and building a pipeline. If you've seen Back to the Future, you'll likely recognise the shoes on screen. And if you've been to a previous AAGE, you'll know that Dan likes to get us all matching sneakers. So hopefully next year, this is what you'll see us in. The clear trend that we've seen over the past few years is the huge increase in demand for tech students. A few years ago, tech students were only really required by the likes of Google and Facebook, but now companies across every industry require tech students as we head into the fourth industrial revolution. For those of you who haven't heard the term before, the fourth industrial revolution is the current and developing environment in which technologies like AI, virtual reality, and robotics are changing the way that we live. What it means is that companies that we wouldn't normally consider tech companies will still require just as many IT students and engineers. So while there are more students coming out of universities, it's still not enough to keep up with the rate of jobs that are multiplying. The government is looking at introducing legislation to adjust the price of different degree types in order to making pursuing a career in tech more appealing. With initiatives like this, the gap will close over time. However, over the next few years, it's going to be incredibly tough to secure the talent with the massive shortage. So it's going to be really important to have a clear strategy. Excuse me. This year, we've seen a huge rise in the popularity of virtual internships. The Forage, formerly known as Inside Sherpa, have been leading the charge in the space. The Forage helps employers develop a virtual offering that mimics entry-level work done at the employers or the organisations. We have already seen a number of employers putting more emphasis on internship programs in order to pipeline students for the graduate programs. By going virtual, it allows you to tap into the market even earlier. On screen, you'll see a breakdown of our users. You'll see that 50% of our database is made up of final year students, 30% of penultimate students, and 20% first and second year students. Virtual offerings allow you to tap into the market early and hit the other 50% that you wouldn't otherwise be hitting. Employers on GradConnection who introduced a virtual offering in 2020 on average received over 2,000 applications each for the virtual campaigns. This year was obviously a captive audience with everyone being locked inside, but we do expect that this trend will continue to grow. As we approach 2021, we've had to do some pivoting ourselves and put some thought into what next year is going to look like for us. While we hope that next year offers a fresh start, it's going to be here in 2 months, and it seems like there's still some time before things get back to normal, particularly for large events. In order to ensure that we can connect students and employers effectively, we have developed a virtual strategy made up of 2 components, which will be implemented over next season. The first piece is GradConnection Live. Over February and March, the GradConnection website will be getting a makeover to bring your profiles to life. It will be run more like a virtual conference for students with a variety of virtual events that they can engage with. Industry-specific days will be split out and live content will be available for all of our users. So for an example day, it might look like in the morning, it could be a webinar with a range of various employers. Then in the late morning, go into a session with GradConnection around structuring an application or a CV. Then coming back after lunch, it might be a session with where students can engage with current graduates from a range of different employers. So GradConnection Live will be run in conjunction with our other offering, which is a virtual careers fair. Given our unique position, we're poised to be the largest careers fair in Australia, as we're able to include every university across the country. We hope that by having employers and all employers and all students in one place, that the process is streamlined for both sides. One piece of feedback that we've had from students was that at careers fairs, their experience could be improved by knowing which employers were relevant to them. We've heard endless stories of students speaking to employers only to find out they didn't have the right degree or the correct work rights. The technology that we're using allows us to set up filters to offer a tailored experience for both students and employers, and then in order to make sure that the people they're connecting with are relevant. Over the next month, we'll be sharing more information and detail around how both events will play out and how you can be involved, but do feel free to get in touch with us with any questions. For now, I think I will be throwing back to Ben from the AAGE, and we're going to do a bit of a Q&A. So if you have any questions that you'd like answered or discussed, feel free to shoot them through and we'll do our best to answer. Thanks.
To the GradConnection team, I'm looking at questions. So what have we got here? You talked about tech being in demand from employers. So we have a question asking the word tech is so broad. Can you add any more detail as to what areas of tech specifically employers are looking for at the moment? Anybody?
Yeah, I can have a go at that one. So it is quite split. Interesting. We actually added a new tech discipline earlier in the year, being cybersecurity. That is an emerging market, I think, and certainly one that does need to be split out for us because it was previously housed within our information technology area. We have disciplines across information technology, information systems, software engineering and computer science. And it really depends on the employer as to which type of tech student they're after. So generally what we're seeing is the broader employers, so your banks, your professional services, those sort of guys, just want someone with a tech background, not necessarily one of those specific types of roles or types of degrees. Whereas if you're going into a more sort of techie role at a tech company, you might need a software engineer specifically. And so we would then target specifically to software engineers and they might need it, or computer science, they might need a specific type of background. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of, hopefully that answers the question. Happy to take a follow-up if that helps.
Yeah, I can submit another one. Right. Next question. How are you going to get students to attend a virtual careers fair?
Well, I mean, we've already done obviously sort of setting up this, we've done a lot of surveying to see what was going to be the best way going forward. Obviously, previously, the live events have been in demand, but now just due to limitations, there was only sort of certain options that we had. But from the feedback that we've got from the surveys and stuff that we've done with students, the likelihood of them attending seems to be pretty solid in terms of wrong gamma. But in terms of the sort of attendance rates that we've had from our current events we've done sort of the live webinars and other very similar events. Our attendance rate has been around sort of 65% of the people that have registered. We're already starting to get people registered for the live events already, so we're pretty confident that it should be good going forward.
And I think just adding to that as well, if you don't mind, I think for students feel really comfortable being at home. We're expecting to invite around 50,000 students, having a participation rate of about 10,000. There's going to be lots of marketing that we'll be doing on the data to our existing cohort of registered users on the site. So through social media, EDMs as well, and hopefully through our university partnerships. So there's lots of ways in which we'll be engaging with those students.
All right. A follow up to that, more tricky for you, so prepare yourselves. What about the impact, or how are you going to get Indigenous students with a disability? How is a virtual careers fair going to affect those students' access to the event?
So I'm happy to take that one on. Simon, I think with any identity or diverse group, there's always going to be challenges. Some physical traditional events are going to be more accessible and more attractive to some cohorts than others, and the virtual world will be more attractive to some cohorts than others. with disability particularly, depending on the type of disability, we're actually seeing the virtual world allows a huge portion of the disabled cohort to engage in a way that we had never expected. I mean, anecdotally, we've seen some employers see the number of disabled those with disabilities, self-identifying with disabilities, significantly increase because they haven't had to go to physical assessment centres or one-on-one interviews. Yes, there is a challenge with the Indigenous groups, but that is true of the physical world as well. And we'll do our best to do as much outreach for that as we can.
All right, that's the getting people there. What if loads of people turn up? So what if 10,000 students turn up at your virtual careers fair all at once? How are you going to deal with that volume?
I'm happy to have a go at that one as well, Ben.
James, lucky you.
I think that is the one thing where virtual really works. So the space that we have isn't constrained by four walls and not being able to cram, more than a certain number of people in 4 meters apart, or 4 square meters per person. The nature of the content that we have in a virtual careers fair is that there is some active content, and that is real-time chats, whether it be in a one-on-one or a one-to-many scenario. But we've also got a heap of passive content, entertaining content, whether it be video, links to virtual internships, and all sorts of other things where students can interact with a brand without the need for there to be a human at the other side. So bring on 10,000 visitors in a day.
All right. I'm jumping slightly. You mentioned, somebody mentioned industry-based employer days. Is that referring to, is that degree types or the industry the employer is in? So is that a day for everyone studying engineering as a degree, or is it a day for engineering companies? You know what I mean?
So interesting question, Ben, actually, and quite well put. It will be based on the discipline of the students. Right. So, because as we would know, engineers are not only going to be hired by engineering firms. Engineering students are in demand from a variety of different employers and non-traditional employers as well. The same is true for tech, as Rogan said earlier. So they'll be based on the student discipline, and then the employer will appear in any of those rooms or virtual environments where they will hire students from. So whether that be tech, whether that be engineering, right, accounting, any of those things.
Okay. I've got so many questions here. I'm trying to scroll through them and maintain eye contact to the camera at the same time. Where are we next? I think you surveyed, you had a question here. How would, hang on, that one here. Can you please let us know what was the response about the number of days students wanted to be in the office? So number of days, whether you specifically got that.
I have that one. So 27% said that they wanted to be in the office all the time. 20% said that they wanted 4 days in the office, 1 from home. 25, 3 days in the office and 2 from home. 12%, 2 days in the office and 3 from home. And almost 7% just wanted 1 day in the office and the rest from home. And then 10% said they wanted to be at home all the time.
And I think, just to those numbers, that's echoed in the data that we're seeing across the broader employed population too. I've just recently seen some numbers for SEEK in Australia, and that's, I think, about 1,100, don't quote me on that. But there's about 80% of, our broader business that are completely comfortable with a blended work from home, work from office scenario going forward.
Okay, that's good. Right, next question. Robot Vera sounds interesting. Have you seen or are you aware of other AI technology platforms to support or improve future recruitment? Well, that's a good question.
When I was sort of looking, there were a few bits and pieces that were all sort of shared similarities. I think with Robot Vera, when I saw the video, the phone interviews, I guess with like an interview process is very formulaic as it is. There's only so many questions you can ask. So in that sense, like I can remember when I used to do interviews and you end up asking the same questions. I guess the difference is the person on the receiving end of that rather than the person asking the question. So for the students going through an interview, I mean, we've done the video, the recorded video interviews in the past. So it's just kind of adding a layer of depth to that. So, I mean, from what I can see, like it looks like it's got a wee way to go from what I saw. But, if they're doing, like I was reading that it was going to do if it's doing 1,500 applications a day and it was across like 200 employers. So it's like, essentially, I think it was like 50,000 a day with all the machine learning and stuff. The amount of information that's taken in is going to like develop really quickly. So, this is one piece, like one startup in Russia that's happened like for 2 years. So, over the next 5 to 10, I anticipate it's going to be a bunch.
Right. I'll throw this one in. Who styled the GradConnection crew this year? You're all looking very suave. So is there a stylist now? We couldn't hear the answer there.
Oh, I just said we've got natural style then. No one's
natural style.
We're just, we're just vibing.
I think the other thing as well is Dom didn't get the memo of the sneakers and jeans. So, we'll allow the newbie to have one AFT on.
Dom, oh dear, there might be a meeting afterwards. Right, one last point. Someone asking about all the slides with the stats that you were showing. Is there a way of getting those slides, apart from watching the recording of this session? Are the slides available anywhere on the GradConnection website or just spamming?
Absolutely, Ben. We'll make the deck available from today. But there's also the 3 surveys in their own rights as PDFs that we can share as well. And I know that the team are really excited in November, booking in strategy sessions with all the clients to discuss what the data really means for them on a much more granular basis.
Perfect. Right, we shall wrap up there. I'll just make a couple more announcements. So thank you very much for everyone at the GradConnection team. Thank you for all your support over the years. Look at the rehearsals they went through in the special room and camera people and logos on the screen, styling. Fantastically good. Thank you very much. And obviously, everybody, visit the GradConnection Virtual Expo stall. Someone will be there shortly. Talk to them, register for their prize, get their code word. The code word for this session was?
Attraction.
Attraction. Attraction is the code word. Excellent. Thank you very much, GradConnection. We can switch to me and I'll just quickly wrap up the session. Okay, so just reminding everyone, we're back. That was GradConnection. Prizes. 2 ways of winning prizes. Remember, you can register for exhibitor prizes via their profiles within the virtual expo area, and on gamification, just reminding you the code word there for the GradConnection session was attraction. What's happening now? Tea break now for about half an hour, 30 minutes or so. Then we'll be doing a plenary session where we've got Telstra, and I'm going to be interviewing Telstra about how they navigated 2020. So that's the last session for today. And then later on this evening will be the social evening, starting 7 p.m. Canberra, Hobart, Melbourne, Sydney time. So there we are. Thank you very much for listening. See you in about half an hour. Thank you.